Today we're going to talk about analytics, but more specifically, I'm going to talk about how to look at data. Now, it kind of sounds trivial, like we're all in a kind of data-rich environment. We pride ourselves on being data-oriented decision makers, but more often than not, when I talk to my colleagues in the industry, or when I talk to startups in the industry, and I ask them how they look at their data, then more often than not, I get kind of bombarded by numbers and KPIs and these data-rich models, like decision trees and funnels, and a lot of times it's kind of missing the context of a rational, logical decision-making methodology. And in a good case, what this kind of does is that it kind of leads to a paralysis when looking at data, meaning you collect a lot of data, but there's no action being taken afterwards. And in the bad case, what happens is that you actually get really bad decisions from really good data. So a couple years back, I went to the university to study statistics, and the reason I went to study statistics was because I really love numbers. I wasn't a good enough mathematician. And I really liked the idea of quantifying behavior. And I think that when we quantify human behavior, the kind of words to the story being told are statistics. And all of us as analysts, when we look at our user base, at our data, what we're actually trying to do is trying to decipher the story being told to us by the end user. So what we're going to try to do today is kind of layer a kind of thought process over our data that hopefully will get us to really fast, actionable results and avoid these kind of paralysis kind of modes when looking at our data. So just to reflect on what we have now in the industry. So in the past couple of years, we kind of had a couple of really big evolutionary steps towards understanding our data. And the now bottom line kind of methodology is the R methodology, which basically tells us how to organize and collect our data. It basically says to take our raw data, cut it, slice it up, and dice it, and then kind of divide it into three families of KPIs, acquisition, retention, monetization. But moreover, what it says is that we kind of need to optimize in a kind of linear way, a one-directional way. So when the application launches, we optimize acquisition, then we optimize retention, then we optimize monetization. And in terms of the story being told, we first optimize the message of the application to the outside world, to the universe, to make sure that the messaging is correct, that the messaging is attractive enough, so that in the end, our effective cost per install or effective cost per acquisition is in a good enough state where at some point in the future, we could actually have a profit on it. And then the second step, in the mid-course of the application, what we do is that we optimize the user experience in the application. We basically optimize its longevity. We get to see that the user sticks. He enjoys the application enough so that he actually invites his users. Can all of you hear me? He invites his users, and then once we feel that the experience is good enough, we actually ask him to pay for that experience. And in terms of the product lifecycle, we kind of first optimize the acquisition, then optimize the experience. Then only at the end point of the optimization process do we actually focus on ROI, and where we optimize the value of the user compared to his cost. And then it's like a kind of ongoing process. Now, the thing is that in theory, it sounds great. It's actually really logical. But the truth is that in real life, anybody who's ever built an application knows that it just kind of doesn't work, because the user experience is kind of not one-directional. And when you often go and optimize these kind of KPIs that you look at in terms of the value of the user, you often screw up like old KPIs that you already optimized in the past. So and the last thing about the R methodology is that it does not tell us how to discipline the way we look at data. It kind of tells us in a pretty good way how to collect our data and organize it, but it kind of doesn't tell us how to look at data. And then what it can often lead to is a paralysis in terms of understanding our data. I mean, anybody who's ever optimized an application kind of has gone through this process of collecting a ton of data, slicing it in a ton of different ways, and then after a week, 2 weeks, whatever, you kind of look at the data and you have these like kind of really beautiful graphs and awesome models, and they kind of just don't mean anything. I mean, just think of your retention KPIs. I mean, you could slice them and dice them in like many, many different ways. But the bottom line is that it does not always lead to good, concrete conclusions. So what we kind of tried to do is, in terms of the R methodology and what it lacks, we kind of tried to combat all these kind of 4 issues that we had problems with. And we kind of built a kind of action-oriented methodology that kind of layers itself above ARM. So we did not dismiss ARM. We kind of still use ARM as a sort of data collection and data organization. But the thought process that we built above it is very, very action-oriented to give really, really fast and actionable results. So the actionable analytics methodology, it's layered above ARM. It's based on empiric findings that you have in the application at the current stage, and not on a kind of hierarchical way of optimization. We try to discipline the way we look and organize our data towards actionable, towards actions. And we kind of try to systemize the way we look at data, meaning how we look at data, and not what data to look at and what data and not how to organize it. So what is it? So we still use the 3 families of KPIs. We use acquisition, retention, monetization in a sort of kind of way to organize our data. We collect the raw data and then we slice it, and the KPIs that turn up, we put them into each one of these 3 families. But then the thought process afterwards is totally different. So we have our data, and then we divide it into the 3 families of KPIs, and then we ask ourselves 3 predefined questions in a predefined order. So we first ask ourselves, what's the problem, then where the problem is, and then why do we have this problem? Now, it's not just simple questions. This is actually the way we organize our dashboarding system and the dashboarding flow. So the what dashboard would be a kind of one dashboard, and it would kind of be the heartbeat of the application. And what it would do, it would have these kind of 3 families of KPIs, really high-level KPIs, and it would be a kind of binary dashboard. And what it would say is, do we have a problem, or is everything okay? And then in the event where something actually went wrong, or extremely good, we would then dive into the where dashboards. Now, the where dashboards could be a lot of different dashboards. What they would do is that they would be derived from the what dashboard. And they would actually look at each one of these families of KPIs in a lot of different ways. So you'd have like retention where dashboards, acquisition where dashboards, and you'd have monetization where dashboards. And then to answer the why do we have a problem, we'd either look at product logs to see, or different BA models, or why dashboards. And the last point in this process is that we kind of try to discipline the way we look at data in terms of the amount of KPIs we limit to each dashboard. So we would rather have like 3 dashboards of 10 KPIs than 1 dashboards of 30 KPIs. And the reason for that is that when you look at a lot of points of data, and we have too much data looking at you, a lot of times you just do not make a decision because you're overflowed with data. So let's see an example. So this is kind of an example of a what dashboard. It has like 6 graphs, 2 for each type of like KPI family. And if you were to look at this what dashboard, it's kind of like the heartbeat, like doesn't really say if anything is going on, it just says if everything is fine or something went wrong. And if you were to look at this dashboard, you would see that all the KPIs look pretty much fine, but in the last couple of days, the last 2-3 days, something went wrong in the P&L. So then we would dive into the monetization where dashboards. So this is an example of a where dashboard where it looks at monetization KPIs, but divides it into different segments of users, right? So in this where dashboard, for instance, you can see that although the DAO is fine, meaning that the segments of the DAO didn't change, so the users kept on coming into the application and kind of probably enjoying the application, something did go wrong in terms of one specific segment, it's ARPU and ARPU-PU. So then the next step would be, we know what the problem is and where the problem is. We would then dive in to try to understand and explain what happened. So it could be something like this. This is kind of model we built where it looks at the way our price packages react to each other. So this is a kind of price packages per that specific segment, and the size of the circles is basically the percentage of the revenue for that segment that package gives, and the distance between those packages is how they interact with each other. And the gray lines are actually arrows, and they reflect the direction of the packages. So if you were to buy a $24.99 package and then buy a $99.99 package, these two circles would get closer, and then the direction of the arrow would be from the $24.99 to the $99.99. And then you could easily see if something in those packages went wrong. But a wide dashboard could also be models like decision trees or funnels or anything else that can describe what's wrong with the application. So when you build your dashboards in this kind of way, you really quickly, when you get into the office, you open the dashboards, you look at what's happening, you really fast understand if there's a problem, if there's not a problem, and then really quick understand where the problem is. So it gets you to a fast solution and kind of avoid situations like this. So we talked about how to kind of solve problems and how to look at problems in that sort of way. But there's also the active optimization of the application. So when we look at the application as a whole entity, and not as a kind of one-directional process, we needed a kind of metrics that would help us decide what to optimize. So we thought of this metric called elasticity, and it's a metric that's taken from economics. And basically what elasticity does is that it says how much percent will the amount in X change if we change the amount of Y by the same percent or by 8%. So what we would do is that we would look at like 2 KPIs that we want to move, and we'd look at the feature set that we want to build in terms of our development, and we would say, if I were to change our DARPU by 5%, or if I were to change my secondary retention by 2%, how will that affect our bottom lines, or how will that affect our top line, right? Or how will that affect our acquisition costs? So we compared 2 different KPIs that we want to change to the overall revenue that it would change, and then in a really easy way, it would help us to decide which KPI to focus on. So what you would actually get is like a graph that kind of looks something like this, and depending on where you are in the graph, it would kind of help you to decide which one of the KPIs or which one of the features would have a bigger effect on your overall value or retention or whatever you want to change in the application. So the last thing I want to talk about, this whole thought process of how to look at data, the fact that it doesn't limit you to a kind of closed KPI kind of world, it gets you thinking, and it opens up like more room for adding more metrics, which are not necessarily in the like 3 families of KPI world. So I'll give you an example of something that we use in our company. So we use a KPI called the singular point, and basically what it is that we look for a KPI that can describe monetization, engagement data in like one KPI. And the reason for that is that we believe that a lot of the engagement data in the application can kind of be summarized in the amount of time a user spends in the app, but how to affect the amount of time has a lot of derivatives. And when we optimize the economy in the application, we need to optimize the price packages, but we also need to optimize the kind of freebies that we give inside the application. So we kind of wanted to get all of that into kind of one metric. And a lot of times in applications, you have like different economies for different segmentations or different levels and so on and so on. So we wanted to have one KPI that is like kind of relevant for all in order to understand if you have kind of inflation or deflation in the application and stuff like that. So a singular point is basically a vertex in a kind of geometrical figure, and the reason we call this KPI a singular point is because it encompasses all of the derivatives around it. So a singular point in our application would basically be a kind of sort of KPI that describes the amount of time left in an app after a certain action has been taken. So in a kind of slots application, it could be the number of spins left. So the number of spins I'm actually giving a user when I'm giving him some sort of bonus, or the number of spins I'm giving him when he's buying a certain package. Now these packages could be like different across different segments or different like cohorts of users, but since this KPI kind of encompasses everything, you can easily compare it, where if you were just to look at the balance of the users, you would not be able to understand if you have inflation or deflation or something going on in the application. In terms of like a bingo game, it could be like the amount of like bingo rounds left, and so on and so forth. Even in like more in games, there are games like where it's kind of harder to get the singular point, but in the end you could get it in like any kind of game, like even in a kind of Clash of Clans kind of game, you could get to a sort of singular point. So at the end of the day, what you would have is kind of a graph that looks like this. And what it would do is you would kind of have these thresholds of time left in the application in terms of looking at the user's balances. But you would not be looking at their balances. You would look at the time left they have in the application. And when and this is all combines like monetization data and engagement data. So at the end of the day, you would see that like 20% of the users have like 5 minutes left, and then another 30% have like 10 minutes left, and so on and so forth. And it really, really helps to understand if you really have an inflation or deflation in your economy. So just to summarize, actionable analytics, it's the kind of decision-making based on empiricism. So we really, really look at the data on a day-to-day basis and act upon it. And we really try to systemize how we look at data and not what data to collect. We layer it above ARM, so we don't dismiss ARM. And we try to install discipline on the data gathering and the way we look at the data. And if built right, and it's not really easy to build it right, you make a lot of mistakes in the beginning, it will really, really get you far. That's it. Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Yaniv, thanks for your talk. That's super helpful. I'm curious at the size of your analytics team, and I don't need exact numbers, just maybe compare it to other teams within your company, maybe compare it to the marketing team or some other teams, just to get a sense of how much you guys are investing in this area.
Okay, so like my background is in statistics, so my background is in analytics. But aside from me, we have 3 analysts, 2 BA and one BI. And but the dashboarding system does not really need analysts. You need one BI guy, and you kind of need to like guide them into how you want to see the dashboards built. But the minute they're built, that's it. It's not an ongoing process.
I guess building on from that though, what is the discipline? What is the requirements to building a team that could come up with this kind of analytics, from an implementation standpoint?
In terms of what, development or?
Well, I mean, just to understand, to know how to take that data, parse it, focus it, come up with a system like this.
Yeah, so I don't think you need a lot of people. I mean, you just need the discipline to really think in that way. Like to think in kind of action-oriented way. I mean, we built our data system internally, so we built it in a way where it's kind of focused on this. Now, the reason we built it internally is exactly because of this, because a lot of the systems that we saw outside at that point, it was like 2 years ago, did not answer these questions. There was a lot of data, but it wasn't kind of action-oriented in the way that we wanted it to be. So again, it's not. It's just a thought process. In terms of like headcount, in terms of analysts, it's not that much because the minute you have a dashboarding system, it's just the way to organize it.
And internal versus external data analytics has always been a controversial topic in this industry. Given the fact that there was a lack of what you needed, have you thought about spinning it off?
We thought about it. We actually talked about it kind of a year ago because our internal data system is, we believe, a really good system. We kind of need to make it prettier, right? But it's good. It's very, very useful. We thought about it. It's not a focus at this point. We're focusing on other things, but we're thinking about it in the future. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hi there. Just a question on, I guess, the loop cycle from establishing the dashboard, gathering the data, going through all the analytics. I guess in your experience, is there a best practices? The amount of length that you guys kind of focus on any particular dashboard before you go back and go through this, through the feedback loop of, again, creating a new dashboard, testing new KPIs, and going back to the data?
So look, I mean, it's a lot of trial and error, right? And basically in this whole kind of thought process, the what and the why are kind of the easy parts. The really, really hard part is the where, and it looks trivial and it looks easy, and in terms of all of us and in this industry, we're all flooded with data, and everybody is so proud of how they look at their data and the KPI benchmarks and whatever. It looks trivial, but the where dashboards are the really, really hard part because it's really, really easy to kind of mix them up. So it's just trial and error. I mean, you build a kind of where dashboard, and when you build the where dashboard, you got to be focused because you really got to know how to ask the question. So you build it, see if it works. If it doesn't, you just throw it away. But nothing too there's no secret, right? I mean, the data and the KPIs they're known to everybody. Any person with minimal logical thought, can ask the correct questions and can build up the correct data. It's just a way of organizing it. And I mean, the biggest thing that led us to kind of think in this way is really when we see a lot of startups, trying to make it in the industry, And really, when you talk to them and you ask them how do they what's their data plan, how they plan to look at their data, I saw beautiful models, and they worked on it a lot, but it just doesn't lead anywhere, right? Yeah. So.
And this team is within Win, right? Within the social casino?
Yeah, so it's one BI guy that builds the dashboards, and then 2 BA guys that kind of work on their predictive models and the kind of circle model that you looked at.
But you work for one of the biggest real money gaming operators in the world. How does what you've created work within the bigger organization, given that they're targeting a very large market? Have they expressed interest in leveraging the data models that you've created?
They have in the past. I mean, we've talked about it a couple of times in the past. It hasn't gone anywhere, but they were interested in using our BI system because it's really flexible in terms of how it collects and organizes the data, and also in terms of the speed, because it's very, very close to real time. And so it aggregates a ton of data, but it really and gives it and spits it out really close to real time. So they were really interested in it, but so far we haven't integrated. They have their own BI system.
So they have their own BI system.
Yeah.
Interesting. Any other questions? Well, great. Thank you. Really interesting.
Thanks.